After 3 years of work, our follow-up to the Meat Eater Fish and Game Cookbook is here. It's the Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, campfire, and camp stove. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Get your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com or buy it wherever books are sold.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 310. And today in the show, we're back for another episode of our Rut Fresh Radio mini-series in which we're getting the very latest and greatest intel on what deer are doing right now and how you can hunt them. Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Onyx. It is me and Spencer here again for our weekly Rut Fresh Radio episode, in which we are hearing from hunters all across the country on the latest deer activity, what deer are doing right now, how current conditions are impacting deer, and what different people across the country are doing to get some deer killed. That's the game plan, at least. Spencer, you've chatted with some folks. Do we have some interesting stories? Do we have some good intel for folks to work with this week?
Yeah, everybody is optimistic, as they typically are this time of year, because we are like 1 week away here from things kind of really cutting loose. And for those guys who kind of have a target buck in mind or have a few deer in their area that they're interested in, they're about to become daywalkers in like 7 days from now. And so when that happens, it's a great time to kill a target deer before they just get off chasing does in early November. So most hunters are excited.
Yes, I'm right there with them. I've always looked at that last week of October being, like you just said, an especially good chance to get that homebody buck. If you've got a buck that's been hanging out but maybe just not quite in daylight, this might be the time you can capitalize on him, still sticking to a little bit of a pattern, but moving a little bit sooner. So, yeah, I'm hoping to do that exact thing. Tran has not been daylight for me yet, but hoping he will be here soon.
And this is the time of year where those cold fronts can really kind of kick off some of that stuff early. And so like this coming weekend, parts of the country have cold fronts rolling in, and that gets guys really excited. When you would normally like think around that Halloween time is when it's going to happen regardless, but if you get a cold front like between now and then, that typically gets guys a lot more excited to find some of these bucks up moving a little bit earlier than they were, as we're recording this on the 22nd.
Yeah, that takes it to the next level for sure. It looks like, at least as of right now in Michigan, the weather's looking pretty darn good. Like good, cold weather. I even saw some snow in the forecast right around Halloween. So I'm itching. I am curious, though. Folks know I'm out there chasing whitetails. I just got back from my Boundary Waters hunt, by the way. I'm alive. I survived that. I'll save the juicy details for next week, but you also have a whitetail update finally. Do you want to share? Do you have any reports to share from that?
Yes, I was just in South Dakota hunting for about 6 days, and I was hunting an area that is massive. It's a massive refuge that has a lot of CRP. It's mostly managed for ducks, swans, geese, other migratory birds. And at that refuge, there's like 10,000 huntable acres, but there's probably less than 20 trees on the whole thing that you would like actually throw a tree stand up in. So if you find a little bit rise, some kind of small rise in the topography, you can glass for like literal miles of CRP. And so unlike you struggling to seeing deer, I was seeing all sorts of deer, and it was super eye-opening when you're seeing like big numbers of deer. I think the one night I counted like 60 deer that I saw. And on a hunt like that, when you see volume of deer that high, it's really eye-opening, kind of what we talk about this time of year, that you can get really aggressive and get close to their beds, or you can kind of play it safe and wait till like the very end of October. Because on some of those evenings when I would see like 60 deer, I would wager to say that like the first 45 or 50 would be does. And it wasn't until the sun went down or that last bit of daylight that those bucks would get up out of their beds, and they didn't move too far from there. So we kind of talk about that, and you see it every year, and it's something that experienced hunters are aware of. But when you see that many deer and the numbers tilt that far the one way, that the does are up and moving, but the bucks are just tight to their beds until that sunset time, it's really eye-opening about what strategies work right now and what don't.
So you saw a lot of deer. The bucks were on their feet late. Did you see any mature bucks? Did you get a shot? Do you get a buck story?
I don't have a buck story. I didn't see much for mature deer, and I didn't kill one. So I just came home with sightings, and that's it.
Well, still fun?
Absolutely, yeah. And it was like a good way to kick things off, because now I kind of hit a bit of marathon of hunting here. So that was a fun way to start the season.
Sweet. So what else do we have from the folks? Any other consistent trends other than anticipation and excitement for cool weather? Any big high-level keep this in mind over your next couple hunts that's worth touching on?
The high-level thing that I think to consider is that normally this time of year we're talking about crop harvest. Beans are certainly out at this point. Corn is getting ready to come out. But for most of the hunters that we talked to this week and in weeks prior, they've all kind of stressed that it's going to be a late harvest because of how wet things have been this year. So what that might mean for you if you're somebody who hunts around big ag is that bucks have a few more hiding places in cornfields. Or if you're in a place like Michigan, I know you're always excited for kind of a late harvest mark because it saves some of those deer that might otherwise be an easy target for somebody. So just when you're planning your hunts, in late October, early November, know that the crops are still probably going to be standing, whatever that might mean for you. But for who else we talked to this week, we go to Illinois and talk to Justin Zarr from Bowhunter Die, and then Trey Kerns in West Virginia from 304 Outdoors, and then Joe Kahl from Minnesota Rackstars in Minnesota, and then we talked to Kyler Moppert in Louisiana from Louisiana Bowhunter.
Anyone kill one?
No. Yes, I take that back. Joe Kahl just killed one a few days ago hunting in South Dakota. Now he's back in Minnesota, so he's kind of giving an upper Great Plains, upper Great Lakes area report for us.
Nice. Well, I'm excited to hear this one. As I alluded earlier, I'm particularly excited about the next 7 days, and I'm gonna kind of, I think this is a Babe Ruth thing. I'm gonna Babe Ruth it. I'm gonna say the next 7 days will possibly be my best chance at killing Tran, based off of historical data, based off of weather, based off of some time I've got. I think I've got a chance. So I'm going in. It's a little earlier than you might think. It's not November yet, but I think right around Halloween it could happen. So next week I'm going to try to have a good story for you, Spencer.
I hope you do. And kind of explain that a little bit further, Mark. If somebody is sort of new to deer hunting, it's almost weird to hear you say that the best chance is in these next 7 days, because deer movement actually probably won't peak for another 2 weeks or so. Yeah,
and I kind of very briefly mentioned this at the top, but I'll elaborate. Basically, as you mentioned it, you're seeing deer movement steadily increase through the month of October and then into November. But what we've got going on over the next 7 days or so is there are a lot of bucks that are getting very high levels of testosterone. Like, these bucks are ready to rock and roll. They want to breed. but not many does have come into estrus yet. Maybe none of the does yet, or if maybe just one, or a few. Every day we're going to have a better chance of more and more does coming into estrus. But basically what that means is that you're going to get bucks that are starting to move a little bit more, a little bit earlier. If there's that mature buck that, is hanging out locally on your property, I really like if there's a buck that's, I call him a homebody, like a deer that its core home area is there on your farm. He's bedding there. Either you've seen him frequently, you've got pictures of him frequently, but if you kind of know his main pattern, his main behaviors, I think he's bedding here or here, I think he's feeding here or here. If you know that kind of information, over the next 7 days or so, he's probably going to stick to that same basic trend. He's not getting full rut mode where he's chasing does all over the place and going on excursions all over the place like he might do in November. So in November, that buck becomes much less predictable. Yes, he'll be moving a lot, but you don't know what the heck he's going to do. Now you're going to get this, last week of October, you're going to get the benefits of increased movement, but also the same benefits of the predictable movement is that he's sticking to a similar trend, a similar pattern. So when those two things line up, you've got a disproportionately high chance of getting a shot. Not always, but if things line up, if conditions line up, and if you have that intel, it can be a great time to do it before he starts getting crazy. So I think I have that with Tran. I'm looking at a trail camera picture of him 2 days ago, and he looks really good. So he's around, he's moving. This picture was just a tiny bit before daylight in the morning. He's coming back to bed, it looks like just before daylight. So, over the next 7 to 10 days, hopefully that trend shifts just a little bit and he stays up and moving an hour later in the morning or gets up and going an hour earlier in the evening. And that's what I'm going to try to key in on.
Yeah, we did a great job explaining that. And for more info like that, you guys should check out themeateater.com. Mark has been covering some really good subjects that people are often wondering about this time of year, like deer hunting in the rain, how to rattle in a buck, how to kill a nocturnal buck, stuff like that. So head over to themeateater.com for more great info like that. And Mark, I hope you have that Tran report for us next week.
Fingers crossed, my friend. Fingers crossed.
After 3 years of work, our follow-up to the Meat Eater Fish and Game Cookbook is here. It's the Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, campfire, and camp stove. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Get your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com or buy it wherever books are sold.
All right, and joining us on the line first is Justin Zarr from Bowhunter in Illinois. Now, Justin, in Illinois, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
I am going to give it a 6. I feel like the bucks are definitely on their feet during daylight. I don't think they're ranging super far yet during daylight, but nighttime activity is really, really starting to pick up.
Do you do much decoying on your properties in Illinois?
Man, I tell you what, I don't. I've been thinking about it, but, with us, we mostly self-film our hunts, and I'm dragging a lot of gear into the woods already. A decoy is just kind of one extra thing that I got to bring out there. So I've done it in the past, not a lot, but I certainly wouldn't hesitate to do it. And if I was going to do it now, seems like a pretty good time.
When I think of the Bowhunter Die crew, I often associate them with killing big bucks at the end of October. What is it about your group that makes you guys so good at killing those target bucks this time of year?
I think it's just, being in the woods and having a pretty good beat on where these bucks are at. Like I was saying, this time of year, I don't feel like the bucks are covering large amounts of territory or ground during daylight, but they're definitely up and on their feet and moving around. So if you have a general idea of where a buck is at, and where the does are at in that general vicinity, you've got a pretty good opportunity. This last, let's say, 10 days of October has always been one of my favorite times of the year to hunt, because bucks are a little bit more predictable. going to be come November. So I just feel like if you have an idea where they're at and you get the right weather, you could definitely get on top of one. And as you kind of alluded to, they're fairly susceptible to calling this time of year. Most of the does aren't in estrus yet, so they're looking for a fight.
Besides acorns, what other food sources should hunters in Illinois be keyed in on right now?
Oh man, I'm seeing good activity around either corns or beans. To be honest with you, I wouldn't say either one over the other. It seems like a lot of the harvest is going to be late this year, at least up in northern Illinois where we're at. Most of the fields are still standing, but the ones that have been cut have been pretty hot. Those fresh cut corn or fresh cut beans, either one. If you've got one of those seem to be really hot right now. Other than that, if you've got food plots in the ground, a lot of my brassica plots, oats, rye, stuff like that are really getting hammered right now as well. And of course, acorns. Acorns are still going to be gone.
As someone who selectively pressures their property, when do you usually start mornings, and when are you going to start hunting mornings this season?
I'm hunting mornings now. I mean, we've had pretty good weather conditions. Bucks have been on their feet, so I've already started hunting mornings very sparingly. But from here moving forward, it's full speed ahead, man. Mornings, afternoons, any opportunity I've got to be in a tree, I'm going to be out there.
You talked about calling before. Are you doing a lot of blind calling this time of year? And do you have an ideal setup, like a certain stand location that you'd rather call from than others, or morning versus evening?
I'm not a huge blind calling fan. I'll call to a deer if I don't think he's direction and I can see him, but I'm not a guy that's just going to sit and rattle and grunt a lot. I will do it sparingly. I mean, if we get a good, hard, cold snap, in a clear morning, without a lot of wind where I know it can be heard for a long ways and I want to cover some distance, I'll hit the antlers together, but I do it sparingly. Most of my calling is to animals that I can actually have two eyes on and be able to, like I said, tailor my calling to what their body language is telling me.
You're headed to Iowa this weekend on a public land whitetail hunt. What is going to be your strategy for that hunt?
Try to find some does and thick bedding cover. That's going to be my main strategy. Food, on a lot of these public spots is difficult to find because a lot of the ag is on the neighboring private. So I'm going to focus primarily on bedding areas. If I can get close to food, great. If not, I'm really looking for doe bedding is what I'm looking at right now.
Going forward then this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Illinois?
I think we're going to start ramping up to a 7 or 8. I'm already seeing pretty heavy chasing on my trail camera. 2 minutes of daylight. Seems like some of the younger really pushing these does around pretty hard right now. I would imagine we start seeing some of the older ones doing the same thing over the next week. So a 7, maybe an 8. We got some cold weather coming in, possibly some snow flurries, some frost. So everything is shaping up to be a really, really good end to October here.
Well, I look forward to following you guys' adventures on Bowhunter Die. Thanks for joining me, Justin.
No problem. Thanks, Spencer.
All right, and joining us on the line next is Trey Kerns in West Virginia from 304 Outdoors. Now, Trey, in West Virginia, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'd have to say it's been a 4 lately. I feel like it's still been really warm. It's been early October the last couple of weeks, and you're really sitting on some dry spells. Haven't had a whole lot of rain here in the eastern side of the United States, and the deer activity has been minimal throughout daylight hours. And then if you do catch some on the trail cameras, that we've been just seeing them relatively night we've had, honestly.
What food sources are you focused on right now in West Virginia?
Focusing on whatever acorns have fallen, and then the greens mainly right now. We're not really focused on grain. We still have some standing corn, but acorns that have fallen, and then also some greens that we've been kind of focusing on as well. And if we're sitting on these hot evening days, we're usually focusing on water sources as well.
Are you seeing a lot of sign making yet, and what do you do with that information when you do find some fresh rubs or scrapes this time of year?
Yeah, I think we're getting into the later half of October now, and with that, we're just trying to focus on finding out where these bucks are, and then also using previous information that we've used the last couple of years, and kind of just know that when it gets around this time of year, it's going to get good and changing, and the weather starts getting better. We'll probably see that tendency where those deer starts popping up in places where we usually see them this time of year.
Do you use any calling tactics in West Virginia?
We do a little bit towards closer to rut. Not a whole lot right now.
With firearm season being about a month away, how do your strategies change when you get to that time of year where firearms hunters are about to hit the woods?
Yeah, I think we try to use that to our own abilities, just because we do have a large quantity of hunters in the woods for firearm season. I think we try to locate ourselves to where we use that to our advantage and have those hunters push deer to us. I don't think it's a negative by any means. I think it's, if you play it right and hunt with, good enough strategy, I think it's going to help you in the end.
Are you hunting mornings yet?
Yeah, we've hunted a couple mornings, and it honestly just depends on what kind of sign we're getting on the trail cameras. It's all dictated on what the deer movement is in that area and what deer it is. So, I mean, if the deer is, shown itself in daylight hours in the morning, and we can avoid its bedding area, we can slip in there, then we'll hunt mornings. But up until about last week, we were all evenings, but we're starting to see some more movement this morning. So we're just going to try to slide in there probably this weekend and get some more morning sets, maybe do a couple all-day sets.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in West Virginia?
I think that buck activity is definitely going to be probably around a 7. I don't think it's quite there, but I do think that this week with the change in pattern and everything with the weather, I think it's really going to start clicking things and get you over that hump that, we've kind of been waiting on.
All right, Trey, good luck this season, and thanks for joining me.
All right, thank you.
All right, and joining us on the line next is Joe Kahl from Minnesota Rackstars. Now, Joe, in Minnesota, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
If you would have asked me last week, I would have said about a 1 to 2. Everything we've seen on our trail cameras has been a lot of nocturnal movement, but in the last couple days here, we're starting to pick up some bucks that are showing up just at last light. So I would bump 4 or 5 for sure. And I think that they're starting to be a little more territorial, starting to spar around a little bit more, and then also checking their scrapes.
You just mentioned scrapes there. Are you seeing a lot of sign making then right now?
Yeah. I think the little guys are getting a little antsy. The younger bucks, they're kind of running around with some does right now. But the older guys, the more mature deer, they know what's up, and they know it's going to be a little bit yet before things really get rocking. So that they're more focused on territory, and they're starting to hit those scrapes and making sure that everybody knows that they're in the area and this is their territory. I know 2 years ago, I ended up catching a buck, just that last light. I watched him go to bed, and I waited there all day for him. And he got up just at last light, and he come and he made a couple scrapes, and I ended up taking him. But kind of seen the same thing. You got to be patient. Those younger ones are going to be moving a little earlier. But if you can get near a buck bedding area where you can find some good signs, some good scrapes, some good rubs, I think you're going to have a good chance of putting something decent on the ground.
Are you using any really aggressive tactics this time of year, like calling or decoying there in Minnesota?
I was actually just talking to my cousin about that the other day. He went and picked up a decoy, and I have the perfect spot for a decoy. It's in a section. I just purchased 43 acres this past summer, and it's in a section that's a 3 by 1 mile section. And I have a nice 5-acre field kind of right in the middle of it. And it's just a perfect spot for a decoy. And that's something I'm going to try this year. It's just a matter of being at the right spot at the right time, I guess. But the biggest thing that we're being aggressive with is we're getting really close to those buck bedding areas, but we're waiting for the right wind, right temperatures to sneak in those spots. And, this past year, we've actually been pretty successful seeing some good deer. But now is the time to really get after it. I know the deer are a little more educated after this last weekend here in Minnesota. They had a youth firearms season. So the deer are a little more educated right now. It's going to be a little more difficult.
Most of the Midwest is looking at a late harvest this year. Is that the case in Minnesota, and how does that change things for you?
Yeah, right now we actually are way behind harvest. Last week here towards the tail end, some farmers were starting to get in the field, but between last night and today, we picked up about 2 to 3 inches, and that's really going to set things back. So those deer have a lot more cover. You're going to have to try to, figure out those crop lines and tree lines where you can kind of maybe catch them skirting around the edge. But, that provides a lot more cover for these deer. There's a lot more cover out there for them. I guess the way I look at it is, if the crops aren't going to be out anytime soon. I think it's multiple times in order for these crops to come out around here. But the only positive I see out of it is, more deer are probably going to make it through this season, and in return, we're going to have some bigger bucks next year. So it's kind of a give and take, I guess.
When firearm seasons start to open in mid-November for Minnesota, how do you guys plan for that, and how do you adjust your hunts for that? We really hit it hard with archery just before firearm season. It's tough sitting there, and you just got to go to your hot spots, even if the conditions aren't right. You got to get in there and be aggressive. Around here, I hunted South Dakota this past week, and the biggest difference I see between a lot of other states and Minnesota is that just the size of the sections. Around here, a lot of people have 40s, 40 acres, and on that 40 acres, there's multiple people hunting. Where you get to some of these other states, people own sections, and you only, in some spots you only have 5-6 people hunting those sections, which, more deer are able to get by. But around here, there's usually a pretty good deer harvest, so we really try to kick things down a little bit just before rifle season starts. But it's always a good time. Rifle, it's a great tradition here in Minnesota. Be able to get together with your family and friends. Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Minnesota?
Yeah, I think, I'm looking at the radar right now, and this weekend it's supposed to warm up quite a bit. And when I say warm up quite a bit, it's going to be, around 40, and it's going to bump up to upper 50s. And then kind of the start of the next week, it's going to drop back down into the 30s and 20s for lows. So hopefully some of the big guys we have on camera make their way out.
All right, Joe, well, good luck to you and everyone else from Minnesota Rackstars. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks.
All right, and joining us on the line next is Kyler Moppert from Louisiana Bowhunter in Louisiana. Now, Kyler, in Louisiana, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I would put it at a 7 right now for early season. It's been abnormally high buck activity for this early in the year for our state.
Now, Louisiana kind of has 3 different phases of the rut going on at all times. You've kind of got the Florida deer, the Midwestern deer similar to Alabama. Can you explain to me those 3 different populations and what phase of the rut they'd be in right now?
Sure. So we've got 3 distinct rut phases, just like you said, for different areas of the state. For coastal deer, marsh deer is what we would call them. They're a little smaller in size, smaller body size, and they don't get to be as large racked either. Those are going to rut early, like Southwest Louisiana might even be a week or 2 past its main rut right now. They start their rut in September. The season starts September 15th in those areas. And then we've got, you could say, more native deer in Louisiana that were closer to the river parishes, parish being a county everywhere else in the U.S. Those deer have been, you could say, adaptive to the flooding cycles for generations, and they always rut a little later. Those would have a lot more in common with like a South Alabama rut, where it can kick off anywhere between middle of January and roll on into the middle of March on game camera. And then we have back in the mid 1960s, we had a large population of Midwestern deer came out of Minnesota and Wisconsin areas that were released in Louisiana. That they are very much timed with the Midwestern rut. They're going to go into rut kind of the beginning to middle of November and maybe fizzle out the very beginning of December. So 3 distinct areas. Of course, when you get into maybe the overlapping lines of one group into another regionally, that it can blur a little bit. But we've got that would be the main 3 that we've got in the state. Yeah.
The rest of the country is really focused on probably acorns right now and sign making. What are you seeing in Louisiana at this moment for sign making and acorns?
So for sign making, seeing a lot of really early rubs. I saw my first scrape over the weekend hunting public land. But honestly, where I was hunting the area, it doesn't go into rut until Christmas or after. So it might have just been more territorial more than any sign of the rut, but that was in Northeast Louisiana. But I the sign making and I guess the way I've been seeing the deer behave is we've been in a big drought for the past month and a half or so. So it's one of the few times that I've ever actually focused on hunting a water source. Because one thing about Louisiana is we only have two water levels. We have just enough water or way too much water. we very rarely have a drought. And so when it was dry for almost nearly a month and a half, creek crossings were a big focus for me and a lot of public land and private land hunters. If you're trying to find where deer are going to go find water, acorns are starting to drop now. I think our hard mast trees are scheduled a little later than y'all's up north. We are just now starting to see really consistent white oak, cow oak, and overcup acorns falling, that's always my target for October. And then we'll get the red oaks and the pin oaks dropping here heavily as well, but they'll always favor the white oaks before the red oaks and pin oaks where we hunt. So a lot of that.
So besides acorns, what other food sources should bow hunters in Louisiana be focused on this time of year, and how will that change as we get into November? With how much flooding the state has had in 2019, there's a lot of areas that have been underwater legitimately from the middle of November all the way until about a month and a half ago. A lot of those are going to be river parishes or areas fed by the Mississippi River, because you got to remember we're at the very bottom, y'all are at the very top. So anything that y'all get rained on with comes down to us about 3 to 4 weeks later. And so when that happens across the country, our waters rise. I know people that weren't able to hunt their deer lease at all, and it just reemerged, if you will, out from under the backwaters a few weeks ago. And so a lot of that is going to have fresh browse, fresh growth, real green saplings, and those deer are going to move back into those flooded areas just as quickly as the water recedes. They'll be right there step for step with that water headed back out, going back to their you can say their homelands. So browse is something that we shouldn't be overlooking. I've been hunting a lot of bedding areas and thickets. I jokingly say all of Louisiana is a bedding area. We don't have the luxury of saying this is where the deer sleep, this is where the deer eat. It's not like that down here. Everywhere is where they sleep. Everywhere is where they eat. But I have been noticing a lot of briars and smilax and thorn bushes and things like that being hit very hard, where you'll see nothing but stems coming out of the ground. And a few days before, it was a big bushy briar patch. So browse is a good attraction as well if you don't have acorns dropping right now in your area. And then, we also are a state that allows feeding, supplemental feeding. And I know a lot of people that are getting good results from that as well. Going forward then this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Louisiana?
So I think it's going to increase. I'll increase it a point. I'll put it at an 8. That's a little high for this time of year. Buck activity and the number and size combined, the number and size of deer that have fallen, the quality deer that have fallen in the first month of bow season in Louisiana is probably the greatest that I've witnessed personally in the last 4 or 5 years. Maybe it is the fact that it's been so dry that deer have to get up and go find water. They don't have something within 20, 30 yards of where they're laying down. But for how hot it's been, we've been in the 90s all October. Opening day was 98 degrees. And there were some absolute giants that were killed the first week of bow season in weather that you would not climb up in a deer stand in. And so maybe it's just uncharacteristically high weather has them up on their feet. Hot weather has them up on their feet, And I think this week coming up with this cold front coming down, I think it's only going to get better.
All right, Kyler. Well, I'm at the headwaters in the Zarr River here in Montana. I'll try to stop sending water your way. Good luck this season, and thanks for joining me.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Spencer. Y'all have a good day.
And that concludes this week's episode of Rut Fresh Radio. Thanks to Justin, Trey, Joe, and Kyler for joining me, and thank you guys for listening. If you want more great whitetail content like this, make sure you're subscribed to the Whitetail Weekly newsletter that Mark and I put together for Meat Eater, and make sure you're regularly checking out themeateater.com for more of what we're writing. Good luck to everybody this week who's out there like Mark trying to kill that target buck as they get more restless here at the end of the month. And until next week, stay wired to hunt.
After 3 years of work, our follow-up to the Meat Eater Fish and Game Cookbook is here. It's the Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, campfire, and camp stove. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Get your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com or buy it wherever books are sold.